It's a beautiful day in Wisconsin, and welcome to Banging on the Drum podcast. We're a day late and a host short, but we are going to get an episode out this week. And just to give a quick update on the sports that we have been following through the week, sadly, this will probably end up being relatively short because I just have kind of the basics, and it is only me tonight. Pat was unable to make it this week. He's got some stuff going on in life that I'm sure that he'll let us know about when he comes back next week. We'll get something recorded here shortly, I'm sure, when his stuff kind of settles in, right? And so this one will be kind of a difficult one. I've done one of these in the past where I go solo, but way more challenging, right? So no way to bounce ideas off other people, and I'm just kind of running it out there tonight. But I do think it's important to get one out every week. So if you guys are out there and you're listening, just me this week. I apologize for that. It's probably not the best content you can get on a podcast that's out there, but we appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, do your thing. Like it on Twitter or on YouTube, right? And then we're also on all your podcast channels. So share it with a friend, send it to them, tell them it's the greatest podcast on the planet, and then just, I don't know, let them download it and see for themselves. They'll probably shut it off right away, especially if it's this one, but they could always throw on the Damian Miller one, which is really, really good. And a lot of information about his career and kind of how cool his career ended up being. So please make sure, if you are listening to the podcast and you haven't went back and listened to the Damian Miller one, that is an important one. The Chris Jackie one's not bad, but that was really, really early on in our go of things. And anytime Dusty or Keel come on or Mark come on, like, those are killer episodes as well. Those guys always kill it every time they're on. So if you want to listen to one that's a little bit better, you can always go back, listen to Damian's or any of those other guys. Awesome guys to have on. Great recordings. Love doing. We did have the Brewers Raptor on at 1.2. He was really good as well. So go listen to those guys. Those are all episodes we've done here in the past. Probably have to reach out to a few of those guys again here coming up. I know with Keel, we'll want to get into the Badgers here shortly. Come end of summer, get into a little bit more on the Packers. We'll see how busy guys like Dusty or Bass are. So, but definitely some good opportunities for collaborating with a few other people. I did go on the Bodkin show. He did an interview show. I did that last Sunday. You guys could also check that out. I had a lot of fun on that show. Really relaxing. I don't know if Nick enjoyed me as a content creator, but his stuff is really good as well. So I'll jump into my unders for the week. So I bought a couch from Menards. It ended up being broken, right? And so one board on it is broken, but Menards runs kind of these flash sales. Some, like, we have, I don't know, 1,000 of these things, and they're cheap. We're trying to get them out of the warehouse, whatever it is, get a pretty good deal on them. So we buy one, and then you can't think the whole idea is if they sell out, like, you're kind of screwed. You can't go back and get them again. And so we buy this. There's the frame board in the back is snapped in half, and I thought it was just like one little spot, like worst case scenario, I can't like get everything peeled off and get it fixed correctly. I can just patch it and have like just a board on the back side of it just to make sure it's stable. So I start digging into it. I'm pulling staples off, and I realize it's broken like 3 spots. And so you can't just, so it took me about 4 hours this morning, but pulled it all apart, replaced the board, And then I did end up getting some money back from Menards on that. So that was like okay, right? So not terrible, but I did have to spend probably a good 3 or 4 hours ripping it apart and getting it put back together in like a functional way. And that's probably not the best, right? So you don't want furniture made by Mike Doherty. Mike Doherty doesn't, I do not, I shouldn't talk about myself in third person. That's weird. Don't buy Mike Doherty furniture. I'm just going to tell you, right? If there's ever a company that's Mike Doherty furniture, don't do it. I do not do well with like finishing things in like the proper way. I'm like a 90% guy. I enjoy getting started on things. I like the idea of starting things, but actually like finalizing all details is not my strong suit. And so this time I think I did okay. However, we'll see, like in 2 or 3 years, it'll end up being the whole thing will be falling apart just because of that one board on the back. But I tried this time. I tried to like actually finish the way I was supposed to. And I actually have like a really good example for another under. So my bathtub I put in last August or September, maybe Labor Day weekend. And there's one pipe on there on the drain that just doesn't seem to stay connected, right? And so it drains into my basement, which is unfinished, and just goes down a drain. It's not like the end of the world. I don't store a bunch of stuff in there. We had a flood the first year that I was here, and so I don't like hold stuff down there. I don't do things in there, right? Just assume that it's going to flood again at some point, and don't put all your stuff down there. That's the way we operate. And so bathtub, the drain starts leaking on me. It did it probably 4 months ago as well. Just this drain pipe kind of popped off there. For what reason, I'm not really sure. If there was like some pressure buildup or like somebody stepped on the drain wrong and then like because there was water in there or something, the pressure pushed it off there. And then tonight the whole pipe fell off. So the top fell off of it and then the side fell off of it too. So the pipe was like dangling on there. So I had to pull the whole pipe off. And it's just slightly shorter than it needs to be because if it's 2 inches in and like on each end, the problem would be solved. But because I can fix it with what I have, like, and I know it's probably temporary, then I won't fix it. So it's probably like $15 worth of parts, and I would never have water running in my basement again from the tub anyway. Like if it rains and crappy stuff happens, it will flood in my basement again. Like we had some pretty torrential floods the year that it did that, but anyway, that's just a good example of like why you don't want like me to be the guy who's like finishing things. I can start things, I can get things like 90-95% done pretty easily. It's the last 5 to 10% just like drives me crazy. The attention to detail there. All right, jumping into my overs. So my daughter and I have been spending a lot of time playing softball out back. So we play a lot of catch. She's hitting off the tee and then off some live pitching from me. She's going to be in like pitching machine league this year, so doing pretty well. And then so she had her first practices this week. A couple of the fifth grade girls, I guess it would be, because she's going into fourth grade, said she was showing them up, which I enjoy hearing that. So it looks like she's producing pretty well, at least in practice so far, off the pitching machine. She's having a little bit harder time fielding balls, but we'll get her there. And then at the beginning of the year, I had a New Year's resolution to read one book a month, right? Never started. Well, so technically I do read books every month, but I don't think like a 5-page board book or even like a Captain Underpants or a Dogman book are appropriate for completing this task. That those aren't books that are going to make me any better, right? So reading's probably good for me, whether I'm reading to my kids or um, reading something that's for me. But the reading for the kids like is not something that is meaningful, right? It's not good enough for me. And so I have started reading. I have gotten on like the crisis negotiation team at work, and I'm reading a book about one of the original, maybe not original guys on the team, but like a guy in the 90s when like things were really like developed and started with their like the process for the FBI. And so it's kind of a cool like look into the history of how crisis negotiation kind of got started and fine tuned through the FBI lens. And so that's by a guy by the name of Chris Voss, who he's geared it a little bit towards business in this book that he's got now, but it's still some pretty interesting stuff. So I'm going to jump into some sporting news, and like I said, this is going to end up being like a fairly short podcast because I just don't have like, we're in a really slow time. Like if this was a week that the Packers had just played, I could dig in and break down a lot of stuff. I don't watch enough Brewers, and trying to track stats through without watching it is a little bit tough for me. And so I'm just going to kind of we're going to go into barking about the Brewers and just kind of the basics of what's going on and where we're at. So Brewers are 5-5 in the month of June. So I wrote this down on, I think, Thursday. Oakland A's came into town, and I was thinking, oh, that should be an easy weekend sweep. We should be able to just kind of go in and roll them up, right? And they have taken 2 games from us currently. Need a big win tomorrow, Sunday morning, and so they play them at 1. If you have the ability, tune in. If you don't, I get it. Like, so that's where I'm kind of at. I'm tracking stuff trying to track stuff every day with wins and losses. I don't really see a lot on who's dominating, right? But we got 2 guys in our lineup that are hitting over 250, and one only has played in 10 games. So that average more than likely is going to fall, right? So he's not a guy that has been up a long time. Rookies probably struggle significantly more than like veterans do in Major League Baseball. And so Yelich is really the only guy that is going to have a decent average, and his average isn't even that good, maybe high 250s, like 258, 259, somewhere in there, and just not good enough. We need more consistent hitting. In the last 3 games, we've scored 6 runs, I think. I think it was 3, 2, and 1. Losing all 3 of those games. And that's just something that we need to like work on, is like hitting more for average. And I think in Major League Baseball currently, we just don't do that. Like nobody does. They never just hit to be like 330 hitters. I think pitchers have become better. The analytics have become better. They know where to put the ball for each hitter, like what makes that hitter good, what makes that hitter bad, like where in the zone they hit from allows them to like be more effective on the mound, right? So it's just a challenging situation. But I do believe that there's more opportunity to hit for average now that the shift has kind of been banned, right? So there's certain things you can't do. You can't have too many guys standing in the outfield, and you can't like move past second base or something like that. You need to have two guys on each side of second base. However, the rule is actually written. And then there's the pitch clock, which you would imagine would make pitchers more tired moving through a game, allowing more guys to get hits late in the game. But I guess with pitching changes happen in the fifth or sixth inning almost all the time. And at that point, it's hard when you're only seeing them twice a game. If you match up with them 3 or 4 times a game, probably significantly easier to like get an adjustment, get ready to hit that pitcher. Right? Not always, but in a lot of cases, very, very possible. The Brewers remain 24th or lower in the major offensive stats categories, except for home runs. Just not doing enough with the bat. Pitching is not something that I think if you're in the top 5 pitching, you can be this team that can't hit the ball, and they're just not there with the injuries and guys not being in the rotation on a week-to-week basis. Has hurt the Brewers right now. Like, they're just in a spot that is super challenging. If your pitchers aren't going to be there, they're not going to be able to like effectively throw the ball and get guys out, keep games under 3 runs, which they haven't been doing. They have not been able to do that. You're gonna struggle. So right now we're in the first in the NL Central. We're 0 games back but we are like 0.1 points behind the Pirates because they're 33-30 and we're 34-31 if I remember correctly. And so it's like 0.1 or 0.2 in the thing. So technically they're in first, but we're 0 games back. So we have to find a streak here somewhere where we start putting up 5-6 runs a game. And if we can put up 4, 5, 6 runs a game, I think we can get wins. But if you can't hit the ball, you can't put pitchers back on their heels, try to get other hitters to press because they're behind in games, I think you're going to really struggle with winning games. And if you continue the way we are, we're not going to stay atop the NL Central. It'd be nice to see us do that, but right now it does not feel very likely. And the NL Central looks very bad, right? So like we're not beating the teams we should be beating, teams like the A's, and then almost everybody in the NL Central is like even the best teams in the NL Central, the Pirates and the Brewers, are just barely hanging on to 500, right? So going a little skid and we'll be well under 500 very quickly. Something that we're not really used to with the Brewers as of late is to be under 500. So it'd be nice for us to stay above 500, keep rolling, keep the NL Central in our sights, and be able to at least get into those play-in games. So if there's any Brewers out there listening, we need you to do more. You must do more so that we can get more wins. We need the wins. Let's go. All right, jumping to NFL news. We don't have anything like big time on the Packers, so I'll jump into DeAndre Hopkins. And so was cut a couple weeks ago, and he has now started looking for new teams, going on visits. I think he's going to be awfully patient. May play like a Odell role where he joins a team once the season has already started. Or maybe not, right? So like could just find a team that fits him well. Right now, I think he's looked at the Titans and the Patriots. I don't see either of these teams as something he would be overly interested in doing. I'm under the impression that he's still getting paid for this year by the Cardinals, that they had to take a pretty deep cap hit in order to cut him. And so he doesn't have to take a lot of money to go to a team. And neither of these teams shout Super Bowl contender to me, even with DeAndre Hopkins on that team. So the Titans could be a team that makes a splash. The Patriots are always a team that can make a splash because they have Bill Belichick. But I feel like there's, especially in the AFC, more clear-cut guys that have the opportunity to act, or more clear-cut teams that actually have the opportunity to move towards a Super Bowl. A scary one would be the Jets or the Chiefs. You put Hopkins opposite Stefon Diggs in Buffalo. I think that could be scary as well. If you loaded a fourth wide receiver onto the Bengals, Joe Burrow might be able to actually get the ball out in a timely manner, not get hit in like the regular season. I think when it comes to the postseason, Burrow is Jimmy Butler, right? He's a very, very similar guy that he's the guy that can turn things on and turn his team around, that he figures it out. Now, I know the NBA is a much more player-focused league than the NFL, but Joe Burrow just figures out a way that when the chips are down to dominate games. And if you would give him another wide receiver, that would be one of the most ridiculous receiving corps in the NFL if he would decide to go somewhere like that. Now, I don't know if that's actually like realistic or would be beneficial for him to do, right? So if you're going to take a 1-year contract and go someplace, are the Bengals where you want to do that, right? So they have a real opportunity at a Super Bowl, but do you have a real opportunity at contributing to that Super Bowl, which I think guys that play at a high end, that's kind of what they want to do. That they don't want to be the guys that just are there. They want to be the guys that contribute, that like kind of cause the Super Bowl to happen. Yeah, I'm not really sure if I'd want him to be a Packer. That'd be, I would, right? So I would like the opportunity to have him be a Packer, but I do really, really like our receiving core, and I know that it's young, and I know we're going to have some struggles going through the season, but I think they can dominate. I think that we can have two guys that really step out into leading roles in the wide receiving room, and then I think we have another 2 or 3 guys that, if they can get the right opportunities, are going to be really good players in the NFL. And it is a huge reach to say, especially when they're so young, but I have a lot of excitement around Reed and Wicks, Torrey. And I saw a bunch of people thinking Bo Melton's got a good opportunity, or Dubois, who are like undrafted free agents or 7th round picks, just guys you would never expect to really make big impacts on your team. And maybe I'm just like too hyped up on the OTA side of things, like hearing positive stories and things like that coming out of this time, when especially it's like you're not getting hit and you're not wearing any pads, so everybody's a little bit faster. So I get it, but I think there's a lot of potential in that room. I wouldn't want DeAndre Hopkins on a 4-year a 4-year contract. I want him, if the Packers would have him, I would want it on a 1-year incentive laden contract where after this year, the young wide receivers the Packers have drafted over the last 2 years can step in and really start to dominate the league, which I think they're going to do. I think this is the 2008, 2009, 2010 drafts where the Packers were just sitting on a wealth of wide receiver talent. And I guess maybe a guy like Donald Driver being in that room for a long time could have been the thing that kind of drove them forward, right? That they allowed them to stay focused, to turn into the wide receivers that they were. But Jordy's there, James Jones, Greg Jennings, and Randall Cobb. Like those 4 guys created a wide receiving corps that the Packers used to dominate offensively for, I really up until like 2017, I think. And so really, I think that's where we're at, is that the wide receivers and Jordan Love can grow together. And if that's the case, it appears very similar in kind of the way that Aaron Rodgers was able to develop, is with his wide receivers, is to reset that wide receiving room as the new quarterback comes in and kind of gives us a real opportunity to change things up. So I'm interested to see where Hopkins goes. I'm a little curious that everything is landing in the AFC. There's got to be some NFC teams that have a good opportunity at winning the Super Bowl as well. So like, I wouldn't be that surprised if he stopped at the Eagles or stopped at a team like Dallas or Minnesota, who also could potentially be moving in that direction based on last year's records. The Niners, I don't know if he fits into the Niners scheme, right? Is he versatile enough to set into that offense and be effective? I know Shanahan likes to move his wide receivers through the backfield and to use them in the running game or use them in really short pass games, where doesn't feel like that's what Hopkins' game is. I could be wrong about that, but just doesn't feel like that's his like main piece of his game. And so he's a guy that I find very, very interesting on where he'll land and how he'll produce there. I'm hoping he's going to I guess if he's not going to go to the Packers, I hope he goes to like a team that isn't all that good, because I want the Packers to win the Super Bowl. I don't want him to change a team into like something that's super effective and then is going to dominate and go to the Super Bowl. So I'd rather him not, if he's going to be he can go to like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or maybe like, I don't know, the Commanders. Everybody says the Commanders are going to be bad, it feels like, but I'm not sure. Like, I guess that Sam Howell, if you don't have a quarterback, they should have just kept Heineke and seen what he could do as their franchise guy and then build around him. But that's a, personal thought. Speaking of guys that I don't really understand why they get rid of, Dalvin Cook got moved on from Minnesota. I would assume that it's a contract issue, that just getting paid too much to be a running back when you have a guy like Alexander Mattison sitting behind you. Alexander Mattison seems to dominate every time he goes into a game, right? And he appears to be this really, really good running back behind Dalvin Cook. I think that can be misleading as well, to have a guy that isn't focused on, especially when you have a Dalvin Cook in your backfield and then you like switch him out with Mattison. People get a false sense of security that it's not going to be a run. But Madison's good. He just doesn't feel like he's what Cook is. Dalvin Cook could be a benefit to every team in the league, I think. Has seemed to do okay receiving out of the backfield. And I don't understand what Minnesota's doing here. They might have a better idea about what Dalvin Cook is and the reason that you're going to move on from him, but just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I think that people have undervalued the running back position for so long that they think they're all replaceable all the time, and they're just not. The ones that are really good, when they're in their prime, you need to keep them, and you'd almost rather have them fail in a year because you can get that backup off the street on occasion. Right. So I would have rather had something like the Zeke situation where Zeke kind of starts failing for a year or two, but Tony Pollard starts stepping up in those same years. I'd rather have that situation than a situation that the Packers have done with guys like Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, where you move on a year too early, right? So those are two different positions, but in the running back position, if your guy can't produce, I think that it's fairly easy that you could just say, all right, we're going to run the backup a little bit more and still get the production out of the running back room, even though that guy's on your team a year too long. Because for the most part, you're not paying running backs like excessive amounts of money, right? So I want to say Zeke was the highest paid running back in the league at, like $22 million a year or $20 million a year or something like that. Well, he's going to lose his job. So that falls under 20 million, where wide receivers are over 20 million a year. And doesn't feel like you can just pick a guy up off the street as a wide receiver. So you can have like a back that comes in like Dearness Johnson in Cleveland, who's making no money at all, and have positive games because the structure of your offense works for them, even though you have two dominant running backs in front of him. If they're struggling, you could always bring him in and be done with it, right? And have a positive. And I think most teams can find that guy. And if they're not really set up, then they can. So I would have kept Dalvin Cook a year too long rather than a year too short, right? And just really milk as many carries out of him as I could, because I feel like Dalvin Cook is a game changer, and Alexander Mattison can be too, but we've seen those things work in a lot of places like Cleveland, or really any place that had good, like, running back by committees. I think it's worked well in San Francisco that like guys get hurt and the next guy just steps up and plays. Like that's just the way it goes. And part of that is due to scheme, and part of it is due to having the right offensive line in place. And part of it is that talent in the running back room, there's a lot of it, right? Like guys like to touch the ball when they're in high school and college, and they don't have to be 6'3" to be dominant, where wide receivers feel like they have to be a lot bigger these days in order to be dominant. I mean, that isn't 100% rule, but the guys that aren't big, tall, and fast, like it seems like they fall in a draft just because they're not 6'2", 6'3", right? And so I guess with running backs, I don't understand why Dalvin Cook is getting cut. Now, I like that. Like, take real positive players off the Minnesota Vikings. I can deal with that every day. Take a guy that feels like a matchup problem, and instead of having two matchup problems in Cook and Madison, just give us one. I'm okay with that with the Packers defense, that we have to worry about Madison and we don't have to worry about somebody else. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And other things that haven't really made sense is we've been, as a Packers fans, I got a question for kind of what we're doing, what we're going to be doing in the future. So I talked a little bit about our wide receiver room and where I think we are at with that, and that we're going to be like set in that wide receiver room for the next 4 years. And I guess I just wonder what Packers fans are going to do. What will Packers fans be clamoring for in the draft moving forward? What will the general consensus be? So I think for the last 3 or 4 years, the general consensus is go get a wide receiver. We need somebody on the so before Adams left, we need somebody on the opposite side of Adams. And then I guess last year we kind of jumped up. We went to the pick 33 and took Christian Watson. But like, I don't know that like that was enough for Packers fans. Like they thought they should have used one of their first two or their 2 first round picks on a wide receiver there, and they just didn't, right? Like it felt like wide receivers came off the board really, really quick last year. And then this year they again did not use their pick on a wide receiver. They used that pick on a defensive end. So I'm wondering what we will expect the Packers to do, because probably for at least 3 or 4 years, it's been use it on a wide receiver. Go get a wide receiver. We need a wide receiver. We need help. We need offensive help. Aaron Rodgers doesn't throw touchdowns to first round picks. But Aaron Rodgers is going to be one of the most prolific touchdown throwers in the history of NFL football, and has thrown like, I don't know, 6 or 7 of them to a first round pick, and then they're all Mercedes Lewis, right? I think that's okay. That's fine. I don't think that you need first round picks to do that. I think for the most part, wide receivers are going to be interchangeable. You're going to have them turn into what we believe running backs are now, which is like plug and play type players, guys you can find on the street. You can find a guy that's got decent hands and runs good, decent routes like nothing at some point. It's just going to be, they're picking them up off the street. There's so many that come out in every draft. And eventually it'll be like a guy like Jalen Reagor or something like that. They'll be essentially undrafted, right? And he'll be good. He'll be serviceable in the NFL. He'll just never be an elite. And that was a guy that was picked in the top, I don't know, like 15 or something like that. So it's kind of stupid to say, no, he wasn't picked that high. I don't think. I think he fell a bit, right? It might have been between Jefferson and Reagor. I don't have time to look. I don't know for sure either. And so I just wonder what we're going to be clamoring for moving forward. Safety, maybe we might do that. Safety. So I will always clamor for like an edge rusher, left tackle. I'm always fine with going to get a left tackle, especially if he's versatile and can maybe play guard as well. And like hopefully this will never be the case, but like a QB, right? So I hope we're never like, we need to go get a QB. We need to replace Jordan Love. Like I'm hoping, and I've watched a few like YouTube videos on Jordan Love, and I find him to be exceptional, right? I find that he's making good throws, he's making good decisions, but I worry that some of that stuff is in garbage time against defenses that don't care, or defenses that know that they can give him certain things, and he still won't be able to like finish drives just yet. So we'll see where we get with that. In terms of other sports news, we got some NBA news. Damian Lillard and the Trailblazers are looking for a trade. If I'm the Bucks, I do whatever it takes to put Lillard on the Bucks, right? To be the guy that assists Giannis. If you can figure that out, And I don't think they can. I don't think that they have enough picks. I don't think that they have enough assets on their team to put that together. It doesn't like compute in my head that they could, but it appears that they might be looking for a trade, and like Lillard and the Trailblazers are moving on from each other. It'd be very exciting if the Bucks could figure that out. I just don't have much faith that they will. I guess if that's what Lillard wants, the Trailblazers will probably try to make it happen. I think that in the NBA, that's the way things go. Is that you do kind of what the player wants. Now, without being able to collect some picks on that, I don't know how you're going to do that if you're the Trailblazers, right? To gut your team in that way. But maybe it could happen. And then in terms of the NBA Finals, Nuggets are up 3-1. Next game is Sunday. Probably finishes off. It looks like the Nuggets are just a better team. It'll be good for the Nuggets to win it here. They're back at home, and so be a little bit better in that regard. The Heat's mascot got put into the hospital by Conor McGregor. Took a punch, hospitalized. I feel like if you have that padding on, and like I get that the guy probably just hits harder than I could ever imagine, but I don't know. You shouldn't be put in the hospital over a punch through like this huge costume that you're wearing. I could be wrong, right? That I could be minimizing what it is. But maybe Conor McGregor doesn't have to hit the mascot as hard as he possibly can either. That might be good. But I would expect you to be able to do a little bit better than have to go to the hospital after you get punched by Conor McGregor. And maybe the news is like sensationalizing it a little bit that like his costume cut him and he had to like get a stitch or something like that, which wouldn't be that big a deal, right? So that's just the way it goes. Like he hits you in the face, the costume like scratches you on your face. You want to get that tidied up so you don't have a huge scar or something like that. I could understand that too. And then that would be my fault for not reading the entire article and just reading the headline, which very, very possible. All right. And so then I think this is the last head coaching gig that was open. The Raptors hired Darko Rajakovic, and like that name, can't say the last name. Sounds very Eastern European, and I feel like have not had a lot of practice saying names like that, except for Peja Stojanovic, right? So like that one, I remember from my days playing video games and wanting to be the Kings, and that guy could shoot the ball lights out. I like that a lot. In terms of NHL news, Vegas is up 2-1 in the Stanley Cup Finals, and then at the end of the second period, they were leading 3-1 in Game 4. So looks like they have a pretty good hold on Game 4. We'll see how that kind of pans out, right? So I don't know how quickly tides can turn in hockey, but I feel that you can get a couple goals quick. It's definitely possible in the long run. I would like to see Vegas win this. I go out and do my brother-in-law runs a softball game between the Golden Knights and the Raiders. And so I think it would be a fairly cool if they had just won the Stanley Cup, and maybe we could get the Stanley Cup like out there, like on the field, like be able to see it there. Maybe people could go on the field, and I don't think you can hoist it. I think that's one of the rules for the Stanley Cup is you can't actually lift it up, but like you get to touch it or whatever. Might be all right. I don't know if I would care enough to touch it, but maybe, right? It might be like cooler than I expect. There's been things in life that definitely are cooler than I expect. So I do think it would be awesome if Vegas ended up winning it. And so like I'm attempting to be like a Vegas fan, but hockey does not engage me at all. I don't really care. Um, and as far as NASCAR, I feel the same way for the most part. I have enjoyed like tracking what Martin Truex Jr. is doing. And as far as that goes, last week he finished fifth, led for no laps. Kyle Busch won it, had the pole position, and then ended up winning. Didn't lead for all. Like, I wonder if anybody's led from like wire to wire in NASCAR. That'd be an interesting like poll question. I doubt it's ever happened. That'd be pretty unique, especially with like pit stops and things like that. But would be very, very cool if somebody led wire to wire, or essentially wire to wire, even that like he did a pit stop. 3 laps later, the other guy does a pit stop, and then he took all of it back. I would be interested if that ever happened. That might be something that I try to dive into for the rest of the week. Denny Hamlin is on the pole for the Save Smart 350, and Martin Truex Jr. is going to start 8th. That's on tomorrow. I'm looking forward to Martin kind of winning that thing. Should be easily move from 8th to 1st within the first, I don't know, 75 laps, and then after that he'll be able to really hold that pretty easily. I guess we were going to get into like a new segment about things that we're kind of paying attention to, right? So things outside of the sports world that we're kind of engaged in and doing. Lately, I've been listening to a lot of Andrew Huberman, who is a professor of maybe biology, but he gets into the like the psychology and like the brain chemicals behind sleep or sickness, diet, weight gain, like how caffeine works in your brain and things like that. So he's been very interesting. He probably feels a lot like a biohack guy, a guy that is like trying to maximize your human potential through the chemicals that you release based on the exterior world interacting with your body. And so I think it's a pretty cool little idea, right? To maximize your human potential. Never really been there. Exercise I've done. I've tried a lot of these things, but I think my brain jumps around from like thing to thing, and I'm like, I don't get results as fast as I would like to see, and then I'll jump to the next thing. In terms of like diet and nutrition, I do okay with not jumping around because I know that for the most part, diet and nutrition stays the same. If you do the same thing consistently, you can maintain really, really easily. And if you make one drastic change, you can make drastic changes pretty quickly, right? So even if you're trying to gain a lot of weight, like good weight, which is very, very challenging to do, if you make big drastic changes to put more calories in your body and exercise a lot, you can make those changes a lot of times. But Andrew Huberman, it's Huberman Labs podcast, and I've been listening to it over the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 days, and I think it's pretty cool. He's got a pretty unique way of talking about things. Sometimes I get lost in the sauce as he is maybe just too scientific for me, and I don't really understand what he's talking about, but he does try to like make it dumb enough for me to understand. He's definitely attempting that. So most of you guys that are listening will be able to understand it fairly easily, because I'll be in my car and all of a sudden I'll be thinking about something completely different. and he'll just say one phrase, and I'm like, oh man, I'm supposed to be listening to this crap so that I can see if there's anything that I want to do, because I've done this stuff probably from the time I was like 25 or 26 to 31. I did a lot of this stuff, like tried a lot of things, and things worked or didn't work, and I didn't give them enough time to work. There's a lot of that. And so, but cool little podcast. And as far as the solo show, I'm gonna let it go. I think I did more time than I really expected to do. And I appreciate you guys, especially if you stuck around this long. And if you're sticking around this long, you can just give it a subscribe to, for sure, or a thumbs up or a like or whatever. I like if you were willing to listen to me for whatever amount of time this was, even if it's like 15 minutes, and I think it was longer than that, but even if you're willing to listen to me for just that long, you should probably give me a like, because doing a solo go is pretty tough, and I'll be glad to have Pat back next week. But I really appreciate all you guys listening, and for all you suckers doubting the Badgers, the Packers, the Bucks, or the Brewers, you can eat our shorts. Roll it.
All them suckers that doubted the Packers can't eat my shorts. All them suckers that doubted the Packers can't eat my shorts. Eat 'em. All them suckers that doubted the Packers can't eat my shorts. Eat my shorts.